Well, the Yorkshire Dales was designated in 1954. We celebrated our 70th anniversary late last year at an event in Malham, wonderful event. And it was also the 75th anniversary of the legislation that created national parks, that landmark legislation passed by the Attlee post-war government in 1949, the national parks and access to the countryside. So that's the genesis for the national park movement. 10 created then within 8 years of that act. A number of national parks have come along since then. Scotland had its first 2 national parks at the beginning of this century, and hopefully it might have another one on the way. And then the southeast got national parks, southeast of England, in the early 2000s as well, with the New Forest and the South Downs. But of course the Yorkshire Dales remains the preeminent national park in the UK. Well, there are 3 big challenges facing the Yorkshire Dales National Park, as there are all the national parks in the United Kingdom, and they are in relation to climate and what we can do in relation to climate mitigation and adaptation, which is significant in relation to peatland restoration, tree planting and promoting better ways of energy regeneration. The second one is nature recovery. We have an ambition in the Yorkshire Dales to be the home to the finest wildlife in the United Kingdom, and it's not a high bar. I mean, the United Kingdom is a nature depleted country. I use the word deliberately. It's a third world country in terms of its nature, and we're not getting any better about that, so that's an enormous challenge for us. And the third one is just recognising the value of these fantastic landscapes to the public generally, and contributing more to the physical and mental health and well-being of the population. Huge challenges in the health service, which many people will be aware of, and we think we can play a really significant role in improving things there. And I mean, the people who are watching this, they won't get a kind of a big vista of what we're seeing here, but this is an amazing landscape, and it's really, really significant, I think, in terms of people's physical and mental health and well-being. Well, national parks are always a balancing act between the needs of nature, the needs of local communities, increasingly what we're doing in relation to climate and what we can do for the country's health and well-being. But I suppose my hope for the nature, and maybe it's because I'm now a grandparent, I know you wouldn't believe it, would you, looking at this, but I'm a grandparent, is that my generation, and the one that's following it in particular, bite the bullet and take the decisions that they need to take to manage these landscapes for climate and for nature. We cannot keep putting off those decisions in the way that previous generations have, because something has come along that's more urgent, whether it's a war in Ukraine or a cost of living crisis. Those are urgent, and I get that. But the really important stuff around climate and nature, it keeps getting shoved to one side, it keeps getting picked up by the next generation, and frankly, that's not good enough. So my hope is that we take responsibility for delivering for future generations in this country. We recognise that the north of England in particular is seen as an absolute black spot for raptor persecution, and that's been the case for some considerable time now. That causes us difficulties on 2 fronts really. One is that we're increasingly getting feedback from people who live in the area and people who visit the area that continual problem is causing them to not want to come to the Yorkshire Dales, and that's obviously a problem because that's one of our statutory purposes. The second thing is we aspire to be the home to the finest wildlife in the United Kingdom. There are 2 things about that. One is that raptors are part of that. So we want to see more breeding harriers, and there's been some success in recent years in that area, albeit controversial. We've worked with some brilliant landowners who've assisted in that, and we want to see an end to persecution, and that's where there has been failure. So the ways in which we've tried to end persecution, which is essentially getting people round a table and saying, look, if we don't get this sorted and get it sorted soon, someone's going to come along and sort it for us, and that might be government, and they might sort that in a way that is not conducive to how people might want to live and work in these areas. But in spite of that threat, I think, we've just not made the progress that we need to be making in terms of dealing with persecution. And let me just make this last point if I can. Setting aside any responsibilities we've got as a national park for trying to be home to the finest wildlife in the United Kingdom, the fact is that bird of prey persecution is a crime. We kind of object to crime. You know, if government ever introduced a law that said before 10 a.m. each day a child had to kill a bird of prey, we wouldn't be happy about that, but it would be the law. And the law at the moment says birds of prey persecution is a crime. So we will call that out, and we would urge people who've got any information about this to call this out as well. It needs to be removed from this area and indeed from this country. It remains a scourge, and we will do all we can in future, working with the police and relevant bodies to play our part in trying to deal with that.